Hey there, I'm David Wolf, and you're watching the Break It Down Show.
Combined, David and I have recorded over 2,000 episodes of podcasting. And we have no idea what we're doing today. So we're just it's Friday. I'm in a tent. I'm still figuring out the living accommodations out here in my outdoor studio that I just set up yesterday, David. So,
oh man, I didn't realize that. Yeah, the acoustics are quite nice, actually, Pete. You know, there's something with the fabric that actually does that acoustic softening that we so enjoy for
we
recording.
all enjoy it. Yeah, and as an audio technician and as a company that does this kind of thing, you can appreciate that.
Yep.
You can also appreciate that it's got to be well above 100 degrees in this tent right now.
Oh my gosh! So what are you doing for AC? Is there any method to the madness around keeping it cool for you?
I will be doing something. I wasn't sure how hot it would be in here. I thought maybe I could keep it cool with fans.
Yeah.
That has proven to be a bad assumption.
Gotcha.
And so we'll cool it off. We'll get a little AC in here pumping and take it down. But my main preparation is many years in Iraq, walking on the streets of Baghdad and Mosul and that kind of thing. So
you're conditioned. You can take it. You're conditioned. This is relatively not such a bad thing. Yeah. Plenty of water, hydration.
Yes. Yeah. So anyhow, I guess let's just talk about let's have a conversation because, I can talk about what your production company does and we'll certainly do that, but let's just bounce the ball back and forth. Tell us about it.
Sounds great. So, I'm a guy that came out of music production. I'm actually a music composer producer. I learned the business. I learned to play drums and was what we used to call a jobbing musician. Maybe we still call them that in Chicago for many, many years. Played every genre you could imagine, but there was a point I reached where I needed to do more. So I learned how to write music, compose, orchestrate, produce, all of those sorts of things, and learned the business from a guy named Dick Marks, who was one of the three big sort of transformational jingle writers in the Chicago market in advertising. So my roots were really in film scoring, songwriting for advertising, radio, TV, film, etc. And that really kicked it off. In 85, I got married and my wife and I moved to Dallas, Texas, which was a smaller market. We started a company called Cry Wolf Music and ran that together for about 18 years. We had a studio there with for those who are listening who may be familiar with music production technology, Synclavier system. It was a Synclavier was the center of our studio. This is shortly after MIDI came in, for those who are geeking out on music. And so we had a studio there and we had one in Santa Fe as well. And just had a ball. Just great players in Dallas, brass players, rhythm section players, the string folks, the singers are amazing because the history of the radio ID was formed in Dallas, where they'd sing the call letters. So we had really good singers as well, both group and soloists, and we just had a great time. Over the last 10, 15 years or so, I started nibbling away at doing, after having done a completely unrelated project in the bakery space of all places, a family business turnaround. I came back to my roots and started Audavita Studios. We hard booted this company about 2 years ago, but I had been nibbling away with a couple of partners, publishing partners, and started podcasting in 2005 or 6, eventually beginning to move into producing for others and getting away from doing the work myself. So those are the roots. Today we have a extended team of about a dozen audio engineers, guys that cut video. We're starting to get into live event production as well online because there's such the market is asking for it now for all the reasons we know. And I love my team. We've got a terrific team. The core group is actually here co-located in New Mexico, but we don't share a building. We're all virtual. It's a very balance sheet light kind of business model, and we're having fun. So.
I love it. Yeah, it's fun when you get good projects to work on, and you're right, the market for what we do, and basically I do the same thing. Folks always ask me. As a matter of fact, I was asked today by a dear friend of mine, how do you make money? Do you do advertisements? And I'm like, yeah, that's a radio model. And for the most part, no. I mean, you can spend a lot of time being your own salesperson and go out and maybe land a client that aligns well with my show.
Right.
But it's not worth the money. The 500, 600, 6,000, whatever it's going to be dollars a month, like you would always be working the sales side. And unless you've got a massive audience, it's just never going to be about ads. But
in terms of the podcasting model, right, Pete? Is that what you're saying in terms of the pure podcasting model? Yeah. When people ask us, Well, there's always this feeling like they want to instantly monetize, and really there's so many indirect ways to monetize the show. And actually it's direct, not indirect. And what I mean by that is, and I'm sure you've talked about this with others as well, is your audience of one. Invite, assuming an interview program, invite people on your own show that you want to engage with and do business with, because something really magical happens when you're recording with someone like you and I are now, streaming as it were. Something happens with the relationship, that there's a bond, there's a thing, and that can transform into a business relationship that you can monetize. So,
I mean, how many times have we had the question after we finish the show, hey,
right.
how do I do this? All the time. It's like,
Right.
I'd like to get involved. And it's like, well, look, you can get involved. It's a lot of work, like any kind of audio endeavor. It's when you just hear the product going into your ears and it sounds so amazing, you don't realize that you have to sit in a 110-degree tent to figure out which air conditioner.
In this particular, yes, exactly. In this particular instance, and by the way, there's some technology you might know about it. We just got hip to it the other day. In fact, we do a lot of post-production on our audiobooks and podcasts, but there's a system that does noise reduction on the fly with no latency, or very little latency. So if you had an air conditioner in the background and you're using, a cardioid mic, it may pick it up, but this thing scrapes out particularly constant state, just like your noise reduction algorithms in post-production. It's really, really cool. It's called Crispr. I think it's called Crisp. Crisp.io, I believe. I think it's Crisp if you with a K. And so, we were experimenting with it. It does a little bit of it does a little thing to your voice, but it's sort of a pain-pleasure equation, in terms of the audio. Yeah, you got it.
By the way, one of the compromises, because the studio is new for the backyard, the marquee. And normally this would be on the shelf behind me in the house, but because we're in the tent, I have to mount this some way, which I've not figured out yet.
I'm happy with the the Vanna White approach. It's very nice. I feel like it's a game show almost. And here we are. I mean, come on. And I love camping in the tent for the podcast. That's nice. I mean, some guys do it in the garage, right? So here we are.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I take a slick picture, which I'm going to do right now. And I post that on the interwebs for us. And,
I'm having a good hair day, so this should work well.
Yeah, you are having.
Yes, thank you.
What's funny about Jingles is I've got one of those brains that I hold on to Jingles, and
oh yeah.
Like I can sing the whole WKRP theme song. And,
right.
And I often just sing them absent-mindedly. Like if I'm singing to one of the pets, I'll sing the Tootsie Roll, power got the chocolate to chew. Tootsie Roll, think I'm in love with you, whatever. And so I'll sing that to the pet, and I'll put the pet's name in there and make up my own lyrics and stuff.
That's cute.
But that is the brilliance of the jingle, is to make something so infectious that it's just always there,
Yeah, the Songworm. It's funny. For me, I don't know how to say this any other way other than I have a complex mind. So for me as a composer, to approach the challenge of simplicity after having played jazz for many years, and that's when I entered the business. And I remember I was walking down. Dick was an amazing character. He was involved with all the Marlboro cigarettes when they used to do those advertisements, the Snap, Crackle, Pop, Rice Krispies. He wrote all those, did all the Leo Burnett stuff for years. I Follow My Nose, the Fruit Loops stuff. I don't know how old you are, but I grew up with a lot of this stuff. And I'm about 60. So I remember all this stuff, a boomer. And so all those classic sort of Critter. Anyway, we're walking down Michigan Avenue in Chicago one day, and he was just telling me about, how you write jingles, David. He's quite a bit taller than me. I'm a 20-year-old kid still learning the business. Just think of them as nursery rhymes. And this was like because you study how to complex harmony and theory and the academic side of writing music. And as a jazz player, the more complex it is, the more impressed you are with yourself. This was a world where it was really about communicating that memorable quality that you're pointing to, Pete, as that then is associated emotionally with a product. Mm-hmm. Or sometimes not, but we hope it is. And it was a fascinating science. Years later, I was challenged. One of our big clients was, I hope you're sitting down, listeners, Barney the dinosaur.
Oh, wow.
Well, yes. And so the question that you're probably wondering is, did I write the "I Love You" song? And the answer is it's public domain. It's a re-lyric of "This Old Man." So we'll just get that out there. But Barney, yeah, was a huge franchise and a very, very interesting period. We had about I don't know, almost 10-year run with them. And I was doing songwriting for, pre-kindergarten. So it was a flashback to my lessons in learning jingles. It's very simple melodically. And then I would try to sneak in a cool chord change here and there and make it interesting for myself. So,
well, and then also the instrument choice too, right? Like you
Right.
can just yesterday, or not yesterday, 2 days ago, we had Donnie Most from Happy Days. He's Don
Yep.
Most now, but everybody
Yep.
knows him as Donnie.
Yeah.
And he does some crooning, very Sinatra-esque, and we were
Yeah.
talking about that. And then I said there was a guy that was in Tommy Dorsey's orchestra, and he's worked, and he's still with us. His name is Sammy Nestico.
Yep.
And he's like, I know Sammy's work.
I do too.
And
Absolutely.
when I had him on the show, he brought this incredible thought up. It's like, I am older than the electric guitar. And so solos were done by other instruments to include
Right.
the trombone, which is
Right.
in no way a solo instrument commercially anymore. I mean, no one does that. But
Not
in a chamber,
commercially.
you can do what you
Right.
want.
Oh, yeah. And the choice of the sound, as in any musical experience, becomes a part of the expression. So if you can come up with a quirky or a different or a new angle or a new listener experience, as we call them in podcasting, to activate an audience emotionally around a product with a song, or with that instrument, in this instance, that could be a fascinating solution, right? It's like a painter figuring out a color that no one's ever seen.
Yeah. What's your
Yeah.
go-to axe? Is it the keyboard or?
Well, it was drummer originally, and now it's more keyboard. There's one right over there, and I play a little jazz here and there. Mostly I listen now. I was never a great pianist, but I was a composer, so I was inputting parts and working stuff out, and that was my thing. So I've got some chops, but I'm not a great pianist. I played with them in usually small group settings as a drummer. I did a lot of small group jazz.
We've had a lot of drummers on the show.
Really?
The co-founder with the show, he's a drummer as well.
Oh,
and
man,
so
that's
we've
cool.
always gravitated to it because there's a lot to be said when you're doing something different than the rest of the band with a different point of view. They're often up, and they have a different thing.
Yeah.
And they're just so insightful. We had Pink's drummer Mark Schulman has been on the show and
Yep.
talked about how he's sort of the band's dad.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and he just takes care of things spiritually. I mean, everybody knows to show up on time and all that stuff, but just like when you're on the road, you are a family, and someone has to
Yeah.
kind of be the boss.
Yeah, there's a boss thing and there's a glue thing. And it literally in the rhythm section, which is what we call this bass drummer, maybe chord instrument relationship, those guys, maybe guitar or keys, there's a pocket and there's a groove and there's a sense of time going by, which I actually think, because you're laying it down and you're the foundation of things most of the time in most musical genres, at least in Western music, because you're that foundation, you may be the emotional glue and foundation as well. I think there's maybe an analogy there. I could be out of my mind, but
I think, no, I don't think you're out of your mind at all. I think it's 100% correct, because John always says this, you need to know where one is. And that bass, provides the foundation, around the one. Like it's like your
Yep.
framing. And the rest of the band can go crazy and have a good time. That's
Yeah.
obviously some bands do different things. I mean,
Exactly. Yeah. There's if you're talking about free jazz, I mean, you're going to be into a different conversation about this, but for most of our listeners, where is one, the groove, snapping on 2 and 4, these basic things are, and you do facilitate the ability of the singer to back phrase, or
Right.
the trombone player, to use your instrumental example, to riff in a way that's not glued to the pocket. They're floating on top almost. And that's kind of what you're talking about there.
Yeah.
I think that glue thing is what they were talking about when they said that. Thanks,
A lot of people talk about the pocket. I've always been curious. I think everybody has a different pocket. You all know it, you all hear it, but you describe it in different ways. So I'm desperate to know how you describe the pocket.
All right, cool. So a lot about the pocket is the negative space for me as a drummer. And I'm a guy that had to learn how to pocket. Some guys they start and they're what I'll call a natural groove pocket drummer. I was a melodic guy. I was listening to Roy Haynes and Tony Williams and some of the jazz guys that were really liberating the drums. And it wasn't about which is pocket, right? But it was about floating and elastic, and Bill Evans Trio, for those listening that may be familiar with that intimacy of the piano trio. So for me, pocket, but mentally time is still going by. It's just we're elastic with it. We're moving and shaking and we're around it. But with pop music or groove playing, it's very negative space oriented. I think it's where you're not playing is as or more important than where you actually lay that snare backbeat down, for example, or the kick drum doing its thing, leaving the syncopation of it. That kind of thing. So, but my pocket was never. Some drummers like to have this with the bass. They're pulling back and they're leaning back on the beat, and some drummers lean forward on the beat. And ideally, your relationship with the bass player is creating the composite of that interpretation of time is creating what is the pocket. So maybe there's my definition there. I just made that up.
Well, I like it because people say he's got a deep pocket, and it's always just
right. No, right.
It's just weird to hear it, and I'm like, when you ask, you get these different answers. When we had Mick Gillette on the show a while back.
I don't know. Yeah,
probably his last interview.
Wow.
And I said, "What's funk?" Like I know it when I hear it, but like, what is it? It kind of sounds like a chain. If my neck starts bouncing, I'm like, oh, I'm listening to funk. Even if it's not funk, I know there's funk in it.
Right.
And that's sort of my test. And he said, the drums and the guitar or the bass lay down a groove.
Yeah.
And they leave space, and it's 4/4.
Yeah. It's there. But they're, yep.
Exactly. And then it gets jazzy where like the trumpet can play on top of that.
Right.
And, or whatever. And he described like these layers, and it was really fascinating to hear him describe, what funk is. Because again, when you hear it, everybody's like, he's funky. But why is that person funky as opposed do you need two people to be funky?
You might, two at least. I think maybe that's part of it. And the other thing, Pete, as we're talking about it is, first of all, I think you're presumed when you're talking about funk, it's what we call in the music business, a 16th note subdivision. So it's the same tempo I was singing. It could be slower.
Right.
But hear that? Hear how I grabbed it? It's the surprise. 3, 4. So you're surprising and you're moving and rearranging where we expect the thing to happen. It's usually the bass or the kick drum together because the backbeat's probably going to be on 2 and 4 the whole time. That's my sense of it anyway.
Right. And so you really kind of can play with one a little bit and create that anticipation, which maybe makes your neck move to find it.
Yeah, man. No, yeah, you're like, we used to call it grabbing. Yeah, you go ahead and grab the end of, or the E of, grab one, however you'd say it, whatever beat it was. It's you're just before this 1/16th note before the one in that instance, like that. So
yeah. And then when
a lot of fun.
You hear drummers, I mean, again, we've had so many on the show. We've had J.R. Robinson. We also have Nathan East on the show, a bass player.
Yeah, Nathan's great. I have a connection to Nathan. He's a beautiful cat. He was just here in Albuquerque at the Albuquerque Music and Film Festival. I don't think does he call it a festival? I think it's a festival. Anyway, he was a guest artist, came in and played and sat in with the band one night at the party, and he's a beautiful guy.
Do you know Mike C?
What's his name?
Mike C. C-E-E. He's an Albuquerque/LA guy, and he does a lot of producing.
I think I know his name feels familiar to me, but I don't know that I know.
It almost have to because Albuquerque's too small. I'm sure if he walked in the room, you guys would be like, "I know you." You guys would know the same people.
Yeah, we may. I wasn't real active in the live music scene here. I mean, when I got here, I was doing completely unrelated business, and now I've found my way back into the audio production and really the video thing too, as a business owner. But I'm less on the creative side of it. I never really had a playing out life here in Albuquerque. I've been more in studios or doing this production stuff. So, but I know a few guys in town. There's some good players in this town.
Yeah, he does a lot of stuff at his computer as well because he's a producer, and anymore all you really need is just send me your track and then I'll do it all.
Yeah, there's a lot of that going on. Yeah.
So so someone wants to get their book recorded, they can come to you guys. And is it Audavita? or Audavita.
Audavita, yeah.
Audavita.
We're gonna do a little video campaign soon. I'm gonna sing Audavita da 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 because people tend to trip over the name. So I guess I blew it. I created a name that people trip over. So we've got to have some fun with that. But it's Audavita.
Hey, it's a good thing to have.
And Audi is the sound of life. So it's
Right.
it's Latin. So my son helped me name it.
Yeah, no, it's a good name. It's just anytime you put words together, like the company you described earlier that cleans up the background noise. K's and C's and S's can all be different things.
You could trip. Yeah, it's what I call trip over the name, and it's just a hazard of being creative, I guess, with it. But yeah, people can. We're in that business. It's about half of our business is podcast production, and the other half is working with authors, speakers, thought leaders, publishers. We work with like small and mid-sized publishers and author services companies to produce audiobooks. Two basic ways we do that. One is we remotely record the author reading their own, and that's usually in the case, as you would guess, of nonfiction, where it's a business book, it's a self-help book, it's that sort of thing. For the novels, we tend to go out. We have a talent casting team, so we go out and cast talent actors to do those.
That's great.
Kind of a bifurcated model, one or the other, usually.
I mean, we have a lot of authors on the show, and anymore, like your book almost has to be on audio now. Like it's basically a requirement. Not for everybody, but it's Audible is exploding. More and more people are listening to books when they walk and do things. So what does someone who's self-publishing and high-end self-publishing, if you're not gonna sell 2,000 books, you probably don't need to have an audiobook, but what does it cost to and I'm not asking for a quote, but just ballpark.
Yeah, well, our pricing when we include the recording, the remote recording of an author, let's say, which is where a lot of our business is, we use end-to-end recording system called Squadcast to do those sessions, and we make sure they have a good mic. And you're asking, them to. We set them up in a room and in an environment that's appropriate. But you asked about cost, so the range is between 8 cents and 12 cents a word. The way we work is we price by the word, so we provide the author with a fixed cost, so there's no mission creep or budget creep, and then we schedule a series of 90-minute sessions. And everything's written, so it's all driven by word count. So we'll take the word count and usually discount it a little bit. We'll divide by about 9,000, and we come up with a running time, and so that's the formula for us. But it's word count driven as opposed to hours in the studio driven, in terms of the economics, which is really the heart of your question.
Yeah, because I mean, it's hard to sit down and write your history. You're a PhD, but you don't sell a lot of books, but you want to write these things, and you want to get them heard as well as read. You want to get them consumed, but who's got $5,000 to hope that some people listen to the book? It's that over the hill challenge. Like if you're over the hill, you don't care. You're like, that money will pay for itself. Who cares? But if you're getting up the hill, that's the rub.
Well, it is. And, I've told authors that they're better off not even doing the audiobook. We don't want their last few pennies of the budget. They should be out promoting the print or the ebook version. But you mentioned, and the audiobook market over the last 5 years, say about 2015 has been exploding like 25 or more % year over year. It's outstripping the ebook growth if you look at some of the data, and which is really kind of fascinating. But I think it's also what's driving the podcast market, because people have a perceived scarcity of time. They want to multitask. They don't want to be glued to a screen. And so they'll consume an audio podcast, or they'll consume a long form while they're on a trip or a road or a commute or whatever. So a lot of this, it's back to audio content consumption. A lot of the authors, when they first call me, they say, "Oh, my fans, everybody wants me to do audio. They want me to be the voice." And so we tell them, "Look, we're not here to make you sound like a voiceover actor. We could certainly hire someone else to do that. But if you're what I like to call your voice brand, you're the voice of your brand. You are the connectivity to market. It's a great case if you can deal with the economics as a content marketing strategy for us to capture you performing it, and we'll make you sound as good as you can sound in the moment, which is our job." And from there, it connects you to market. But I want to say something about the economics, because we've been talking a little bit about ROI here. Books alone, unless you're a novelist and it's the end product, for a business book or a self-help book, it's part of a larger strategy. The book alone is not, you should not be staring at the transactional value in terms of your ROI. You're out there to the book as a promotional component of a much larger business strategy. And I think that's true in many cases of podcasting as well. A lot of our podcasters have a back-end business model, and the podcast is part of their strategy to promote it. So drive business.
Yeah, well, someone asked me what my market was, and I said someone that understands that a podcast is, a brand or a person or a company that understands that a podcast is a marketing tool primarily. If you can turn it into a profit center, great.
Right.
I've had a number of, because I live here in Southern California, I've had a number of celebrities say, I want to turn it on, I want to start making money. And I said, maybe you can do that. Maybe. But there's no guarantee. Just because you're famous in that world doesn't mean it's going to translate. And oftentimes it does, but I have to, as a consultant, I have to say, this is a risk. Like, you're honestly better off taking another gig. Just go act another time, or do a project in the world where you already have access to money.
That's fascinating. There is a grass is greener. We're all humans, whether you're a celebrity or you're not a celebrity. There's this sense that, I could leverage my celebrity into this other medium, and it might or might not translate. I love the way you said that. And what a beautiful thing. You're cautioning them so they don't waste a lot of time and energy trying to make something happen.
It's a crowded marketplace.
It's very crowded. Yeah,
and
no question, Pete.
If you're delivering on your celebrity, the person who's, selling suits, they are expecting your celebrity to deliver, and they're expecting suits to fly out the door. And maybe you will do that. Decent chance, better than me, but understand that to do that, you're going to have to spend this upfront money no matter what, because now you have to start at even higher level, more professional, and
the bar is a little bit higher. But the funny thing about formats and the way we're recording, and now there's this new live integration that's starting to happen. We're starting to package a lot of like what we're doing here live and then redistribution, which I'm sure is what you're doing, where you're going out to all the channels, the iTunes and Spotify and Stitcher and all the rest. But they're starting as a live event. We're seeing a trend into that. And it seems like the market is leaning into that. The technology solutions are leaning into that. And like StreamYard, which we're using today, or Squadcast is getting into recording video soon, and they're all doing it, So it's fascinating to see that shift, and we're all TV producers now.
I am literally trying to figure out, because one of the things that I was doing before COVID is I would just go to someone's house. So here's this Hollywood person, super famous, whether they're a writer, director, whatever it is. Right. And I can literally, as you know, just sit in their house with them, and they're in their space and have this great conversation.
Right.
But that's obviously not feasible right now. But when it is again, my capability to be portable and mobile, it's incredible. And again, that magic that you opened the show with, that we all experience by having these conversations, it's multiplied when you're in their space. And if you take the time in LA to drive to Hollywood, and you're going to leave after 2:00, they're like, oh my God, I'm like, hey, worth it. And they're like, all right, well, let me dig in, and you get these incredible interviews. This is really like, there's a whole like mobile TV van experience that happens, when you do this though, and we've got to figure all that out.
Yeah, our company is so remotely engaged. That's how we do everything we do. But there was an earlier period of time when I first got into it where I was doing a lot of traveling. Even on the audiobook side of the business, I was literally packing up a small rig of gear and going out and recording authors in their own space before it was feasible to get high quality end-to-end recording done the way we're doing this now. So it's so fascinating. And I think you're right. It's funny, it's sort of counterintuitive. If you're willing to commute and spend the time in traffic on the 405 to get to somebody's house to record them in their own space, there's an inherent value in the fact that you were willing to do that. I think that's what you're saying there, right, Pete? I mean,
exactly. Yeah,
it's a great, it's an investment.
It's an investment in the quality of the show. It's a challenge in the terms of the quality of the production, especially now that I'm going to add video in, because I either have to live switch my own show, which is possible.
Yep.
or I have to bring somebody else with me, which is often happens, and it could be a co-host situation, which I usually do. But yeah, these are the groundbreaking things that are happening right now. Like I would love
Right.
to get Rick Rubin, and who wouldn't? But
Mm-hmm.
if I can go to Rick Rubin's house, my chances of getting Rick Rubin are 10x yours for trying to get his time doing something else.
Right. Right.
And if he's like, hey, 10 o'clock tonight, that's when I've got an hour for you. Guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to get my car. I'm going to drive up the 405, and I need to set up in 5 minutes,
Yep.
or less.
Yeah, it's a quick setup.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of you're transparent. You're just kind of crawling into his zone, his space, his ecosystem, and not being intrusive about it. Because that's how you're going to get that authentic interview. The more comfortable they can be, the better the experience will be. And how their experience is as important as the product, I guess, maybe. Or it's all interactive, I guess. It's all integrated.
Another thing I've discovered from doing these mobile interviews is that when you get there, you put them into host mode. So you show up and you're like, hey, what can I get you? You know what? I baked some cookies the other day. Would you like some of my cookies?
That's cool.
Yeah. And so you probably don't know this about me. I was a spy. And if you offer me food, it's game over. Like, I've done this dance a lot of times. And so I'm like, oh, of course. I'd love to have your cookie. And then I've got them right where I want them. And I'm not doing anything nefarious or anything. But I know that vibe. I've done it with people all over the world. And they're already ensnared into what I do. And that's one of the beautiful things by getting someone in their space is that they go into host mode. They're desperate to give you a drink. You were supposed to say yes. If they offer you the cookies, you take them.
There's a protocol thing you're talking about. Yeah, that's fascinating. Yeah.
What have you learned from podcasting? I mean, you've done it all. You've been on the music side. You've done everything.
Interesting question. So, when I set out to be in the music business, I was very much a behind the scenes composer producer. And my interest was in writing the music, the craft of film scoring. I was always on the other side of the glass producing others. So as I wound that business down and was coming out of a difficult period with this other business, this family turnaround I did, coming back to the things I know how to do, which we all have chapters in our life, right? So I came back to audio, and it was almost like I didn't quite know why, but I felt like I had to open up a mic and create this little series called Smallbiz America. And what the heart of it is I had a really rough time with this little small business, turning it around, and I recognized the plight of the entrepreneur and the small business owner. And I was around people like Michael Gerber and the people that understand the plight of the entrepreneur and how difficult it is to make small business work. And I thought, let me create a series, do something creatively and from a content perspective. And this is 2005, where I can celebrate the hard work that entrepreneurs and small business owners do. So I created this thing called Smallbiz America, and I wrote a little jingle for it, of course. And what it was a 90-second feature. So, and this is I was doing what you talked about earlier, in that I was traveling to small businesses in their locations with a Zoom recorder of the time, whatever model it was at the time. And it was actually this big Marantz I've got behind me over here. And I'd open up the mic and I'd do an interview with these guys, and then I'd cut it down to this 90-minute timed, and then they'd sell in a veil in the middle, a spot in the middle. And I got a syndicator to pop me into about 75 markets. Wow. And I never really monetized it I didn't have the resources to get the sales engine going, but it was an A/B. It's how did Billy Bob, solve his bagel business, profit margins. Find out after this, and then they'd come back, and what I do is pull quotes, and I'd end up with this music playing under it. And, so it was this business sort of problem solution kind of format. And that's what legged me into it. But my use of my voice, even still, I don't have natural voiceover capacity. I think I'm an imposter. So I get along and I can do it okay. I've done a lot of interviews, but it took me a while to figure out how to use a microphone and how to use my voice and how to get comfortable. So what I learned is the art of the interview. How do you do this? How do you pull it out? I listen to good people like, I like Tom Keene on Bloomberg. So I sort of thought of him, and, I sort of imagined myself in being an imposter and trying to infuse my own voice with something about the way they do a follow-up question, and I got into the art of it, and I really enjoyed that rhythm of that, and trying to pull valuable tips out of these entrepreneurs and sometimes famous entrepreneurs that had accomplished great things in business.
Yeah, these are the things that you do pick up along the way that truly, like one of the things, sure, I can show you how to start a podcast, but there's thousands of people trying to sell you that. I'm probably higher in because I'm like, hey, don't forget this, don't forget this, don't forget
Yeah.
this. Should you even do this? Because the biggest thing I
Right.
can help you with is, look, don't bother if this sounds too hard. Because like if naming it is hard, we got a problem.
Yeah.
Naming is simple. Name, go forward, keep going.
Yeah.
One of the biggest things I teach people is how do you host, and I don't mind talking about this on the show because it's easy to say, but it's so hard to do. There are three things that you have to keep track of as a host, right? What does the show need? What does the guest need? And what does the audience need? And if you're not constantly clocking that in your head and keeping your voice in the right part of your neck so you're not down here, but you're also not
Yeah.
like all of those, like
The resonance.
how far am I from the mic, all these things you have to monitor live in real time. Oh, and think of that great question. And then when I talk about great questions, it's not. I like to do a lot of setup questions because I just think that they're interesting conversation starters. But I like what Dan Rather does. He's got Kenny Rogers. Probably the last interview with Kenny Rogers. Got Kenny Rogers there in front of him. He's Dan Rather. He's a master, and they're deep into the interview, and they're talking about Kenny's last two kids that he had, and they're young. And he's just like, God, I love these kids. They're just teaching me so much about life as an old man with these young kids. It's just wonderful, and it's just like the best thing, and I can't get enough of them. For a big breath, Dan sits back and goes, regrets. One word.
Oh yes, he does do that. Absolutely.
Kenny is fearless. Kenny is fearless. Kenny goes, I shouldn't have had those last two kids. I'm too old of a man to do it. Yes, mouth open like that.
Yeah, my mouth just hit the floor, folks, for those of you who are audio only.
That question that Dan, he had everything all set up. He knew he had a fearless guest. He didn't say anything other than regrets and just let it hang there. And Kenny jumped with him. And he said, and Kenny's answer is beautiful. He's like, I love my kids. Of course I love my kids, but I'm too old. They're not going to get to have me there to guide them as men. And I'm not going to get to see who they are. I shouldn't have done that.
Wow. How insightful though, too. Just brave, fearless. And to your point, rather, just a one word. It probably didn't even sound like a question. Well, maybe it did. Regrets? I don't know how he delivered it. You were there, but
regrets. Just like that. Just Dan Rather saying
like
the word
dry.
regrets.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, that's killer.
Yeah. To learn from that. I also like to talk about Vin Scully. When Kirk Gibson hits that home run for the Dodgers in '88, it's a big moment in baseball history. I watch that game all the time. It's really a masterful game. But that setup, the last 5 minutes of baseball action, Vin talks a little bit, but once that home run happens, yeah, exactly. He sits back, and for a full 90 plus seconds on network TV, he doesn't say a damn thing. And then he just says that line, in a year when the impossible happens, now the improbable happens. And then he shuts up again for 45 more seconds. And just
use of space, right?
Yeah.
We were talking about music space, verbal space. I mean, let the game breathe. Let the audience, the ambience of the excitement of the crowd in the stadium happen. Yeah. Sometimes, and I'm not a what you'd call a sports fan, and not particularly wasn't athletic per se, but we watch a lot of tennis, and there sometimes you sense sometimes you just like that quiet and let me watch the match, unless you're going to add real value. And I'm not thinking about anybody in particular, but sometimes there's just a lot of talking, and it's like, oh, please just leave some space. We know you're paid to talk, but kind of a thing. It's just my own little.
Well, it's that describing the obvious thing, and you can certainly do that. There are people that do it, and they do it well. And you're describing like the pitcher and the runner on first are playing a game of cat and mouse. And they can continue to talk through it, and it'll be good. Other people will say the pitcher and first baseman are having a tete-a-tete, and they shut up, and then you just watch them have this meeting, across. And it's like, oh, it's wonderful. Right. So those are the host skills too that I love that you brought that up, because it's such a powerful thing to learn how to have these conversations So learn how to beat your ego back into the box and go, that's an ego question. What's the right question for the audience? You know?
Yep. Always
And then
serving.
for me, I'm not Mike Wallace. I don't want to put you in a corner and make you uncomfortable. That's a great style. He's a bulldog. I'm not. I'll say, hey, David, I'm going to push you on this. Or David, I'm going to challenge you, but you can take it. And then I'm going to ask you the question, you know, because it's not me. I'm asking it for the audience. They are desperate to know this, you know?
Exactly. Exactly. I like that. The way you set it up. You almost asked permission and you allowed the guests to prepare themselves.
Yeah.
And my guess is you're very intuitive about knowing what a guest will, and whether they're fearless like the Kenny Rogers story, or whether it's going to be a little bit like pulling teeth to get this out of them. Maybe I shouldn't go there, or maybe that's why I should go there. If it'll serve the audience, serve the show itself and the listener experience, and then one thing in terms of like sort of the ego of your guest, and one of the things I talk about with our students and our we work with a lot of startup podcasters like you. I don't know if they're startups for you, but for us they are. And what I like to say to them is, look, your guests are going to naturally send you their bio with every degree, every credential, everything they've ever done in their lives, and you don't want to read that as the intro. What I tell them instead is, make a promise to your listener. Why should I stay here? Why should I care? And what am I going to learn? What am I going to get out of this in terms of value? That's the intro. The intro is, here's why we're talking to, Pete Turner today, because we're going to unpack this thing and you just don't want to miss it, kind of a thing, Yeah. I don't know how you approach that. But
I agree 100%. And then of course, again, like everything, there are different ways to do it. Of
course,
a form of jazz. But you're right. Like, there's two things that I want to say to that. One of them is if someone is reading off of their standard talking points, I'm going to say, hey, you know what? You've said that on a bunch of other podcasts. Let's dig deeper today. And they don't ever go, no. I want to stick to they go, oh, thank God. Yes. Could we talk about something else? Okay, great. And then we do. And they love it, and the audience loves it. And then I'll say, hey, for anybody who wants background on, whoever, Morley Safer, who we're going to have on the show today, go listen to David Wolf's episode, because that's what I did to get the background. And I'm not going to ask any of those questions. When I had Andy Summers, John and I went to Andy Summers' house. You know what?
Wow.
Want to ask Andy Summers about? The goddamn police. Now that'll come up in the conversation, but we're never going to say, when are they going to get back together? We're never going to say it was so great on synchronicity when you played that open C chord to start the song. We're never going to do that.
I know. Yeah.
As an artist, this is the question I got to ask Andy Summers. As an artist who's a photographer, a musician, spoken word, all these things.
Artist. Right.
What's in front of you? Who inspires you? And he's like, no. No one's in front of me. My job is to be out on the very edges, of where art is. And then I get to follow up and go, is it possible that you're too far from society and that they can't hang with you? And he's like, that's a great question.
Right. Because there's that calibration, right? For any innovator, whether it's an artist or a scientist, if you're too far out front for the market to be able to digest it and metabolize it, and that's a market thing or an audience thing, maybe, if you're an artist.
And maybe you don't give a damn.
Question.
Maybe you're like, I don't give a damn. I'm Andy Summers. I've made all the money I ever need. This is for people 20 years from now who will finally get it. It's just ahead of its time, which is but you have to ask you can't say, what was it like playing Day on the Green in 1983? Come the fuck up. There's a place for that show. That's not my show.
Exactly. Or I've heard journalists ask, how important is it, fill in the blank? How important is it that, what kind of question is, how important is it? We're talking about it because it's important. I mean, I don't know. It's just sometimes, it's not easy to do it though. I don't know about you. When I first started interviewing folks, I would always do a lot of preparation. I would have every question written out. And as I got better and more fluid, I did more of what we're doing here. I allowed more of myself to come in. I didn't try to be somebody who I'm not, the imposter thing, or try to mimic someone at least internally, it felt like that, to get the style. And I allowed for conversations to occur. I did fewer prep. I'm curious about you. It strikes me that you're pretty extemporaneous. I mean, certainly based on this program.
Yeah, I mean, look, you'll get this, but for the audience to explain these things. Yeah, I looked at your one sheet and I said, "Oh, podcaster, I no longer need to worry about this because you talk all the time." And then I saw that you were a musician. Everything, got it. We're gonna have no problems at all. And so that was the extent of my prep. It was maybe 30 seconds with pulling up the email.
Yeah.
And again, it's not that I'm not prepared, and this is the part that's important to understand for any rookie podcaster. I have gathered intelligence in the most dangerous places on earth with people that want to kill me. I have asked all of the questions in all of the scenarios over and over again. I met people I didn't know and had conversations for years on the battlefield. So there's no way that David Wolf is gonna ask me something or put me in a scenario that I can't handle, right? And so it's very unique for me to be able to do that. So while it might seem like it's extemporaneous, I've already asked all of the David Wolfs all of the questions already. It's not a stretch for me. I've done the work already.
Yeah. Yeah. You have a very, very deep foundation of experience that informs the moment. And so your preparation has been cumulative over your career. It's kind of like back to the music thing. How did he play that solo? How do you do this amazing things in the studio? How did you create that melody? It's because I've been working on my art for 40 years. You know, this is how, I mean, I didn't just do it now, but people that are not as engaged or involved or wired for or weren't born on the planet to do creative things like these things, they won't entirely understand that it didn't just happen now, but there was a lot of preparation. So.
Yes, the person that has everything in their shed and they buy an extra storage facility, but they're always using these things that they've accumulated over the years. That's what happens in our heads. Like you did a chord progression and you're like, oh, that's fascinating. And then you'll think this is 5 years, 10 years, 20 years later, you think this is the time to pull that out. Or and you probably have an old tried and true progression where you're like, this one always works in these situations. It creates this feeling.
Exactly. As a film score guy, absolutely. Or even as a jingle writer, there are certain types of chord progressions or even melodic approaches that tend to do certain things emotionally. I mean, you just said it very well. I reiterated, but it's true. I mean,
so these are the things that make it seem extemporaneous. Again, all the way back to the beginning, that thing that goes into your ear, it seems so wonderful and easy.
Yeah.
But it took years to be able to do it easy. I watched Willie Nelson play the guitar. He primarily does a D-shape chord up and down the neck of his guitar over and over again. It is the easiest thing in the world to do until you have to do it. You're like, how does he get all of that warmth out of his, he's such a master. Like or a BB King. It is not hard to play like BB King. You see what he does. You see how he bends his chords and he uses light strings. Okay, great. And I'm not trying to.
No, you're not diminishing. It's an observation about the illusion of simplicity or the illusion of ease when there's just so much more richness there about how he does it or something like that.
Exactly right. Like, and then he'll sing the Thrill Is Gone, and you realize he's got this wonderful gravelly voice and his guitar, and these two things don't really, in my head, go together very well. But it doesn't matter because because he made it into something that's wonderful, and you're like, oh yeah, I really can't do that. Like that really, I can maybe ape it, but
you could technically do it, but it would not have the soul. It would not have the substance, and it wouldn't be informed by his life point of view, the placement of the notes in time, all of the elements that make it speak. You can play the notes, but if it's not telling us a story, that's.
Someone comes to you and says, I want to start a podcast and I'm serious about it. I'm going to put the work in, and I understand it's going to take 5 times more work than I probably even understand.
Yeah.
How long is it going to take me to become a good interviewer?
That's the question they're asking me. Gosh, I don't know if there's one ubiquitous answer. We have about 30 shows in production right now. And many of they're almost entirely interview. We have a couple of exceptions. We have one woman who's a mental health professional who specializes in narcissistic behavior disorder, of all things. She repurposes articles that she writes for Psych Central, and she's doing a solo gig. She warms it up a little bit with a little bit of in between, but for the most part, she's just reading the article, and she has good numbers, in terms of that kind of a podcast. She really does have some audience there. You asked me about how long does it take to become an interviewer? Well, it took It took me a couple of years to really start to feel like I was even doing anything good in terms of serving my audience. Some of our folks are just intuitive and they leg into it immediately. We have some management consultants in our roster. We have, and then we have other people that are, it's more of a struggle for them. Part of it is because their personality is, I'll say they're on the introverted side of the spectrum, and they're in their head and they're not used to connecting through a microphone. This is a very intimate medium. I don't have to tell you, but for the audience, we think of radio and podcasting as it's one voice to one microphone to one ear, one at a time. It's not all you out there. And so there's almost like a stage fright that can set in for some interviewers, and it's hard to coach them out of it. What it involves for us is working with them in real time. It can't be like, listen to my last interview and give me a critique. I like to work in real time, just like a music coach would, and say, okay, you just did that, but I didn't feel like it connected to me as a human. I just felt like you were reading your question and it felt cold to me and unconnected, not only to your guest, but the audience isn't going to connect. So so we work with our hosts that are less naturally gifted at this, right, understanding of how to connect to connect. I think in most cases I didn't exactly answer the time question, except to say that it's variable across the spectrum of hosts we work with.
That's fair. No, it's fair. Sometimes you've got different insights, but I agree. Like, you don't know, as long as you're recognizing these things, like when the interview hits a different gear. One of the things I encourage hosts to is develop your ear as a producer as well as a host. So again, paying attention to many things. And as I'm producing the show, right, a thing that I learned as a spy was when someone's talking to you, they're giving you the top of mind information, and it might all be true-ish, right? It doesn't mean they're lying, but that's what they're going to give you. You have to listen for things, not to things. And so I listen for the moment when I say stop, go back in time, or stop right there. Tell me more about that. And so then we dive down in. And then if there's continues to be something there, it's like exploring for oil, or I call it mining for gold. If there's something there, you go, okay, now describe that. What did that feel like? What happened before that? Like, what happened before that moment? Did you have any idea? Did you, and all these great gems, because now that person's no longer thinking literally. They're thinking in a completely different fashion, and they're completely consumed with this moment and trying to, they're coming with me. I call it like riding a horse. I'm in total control, but they don't feel it. They're running.
It feels like almost like a form of hypnosis, Pete, as you described it. What you're doing is you're like freezing the moment, and you're diving into the emotional. It's not a linear, this happened and then that happened. You asked me questions about how did it feel?
Yeah.
And what was that moment like? And now they're getting into this visceral sort of the feeling of it, rather than the sort of an academic explanation of this happened and this cause and effect, if you will. So that's fascinating.
And as a host, when you hear yourself, when you hear these opportunities, now you can take them, or you can pass them up. You can say, that's not what I'm looking for. That's not what I'm looking for. That's not. By passing on those things, you're hearing at a different level. And then also, like, just the guts to say, hang on, this show doesn't sound like I want it to sound. I need you to put on headphones, or I need, to produce the show. Like, don't just accept a show that sounds. Sometimes you can't help it, especially with all this remote stuff and everybody's on the waves now.
Right.
But to have the guts to tell someone whose time is what you're so like, it's so incredible to have their time, and you're like, stop, not good enough. I need you to do this. I need you to do that. And know that the audience expects that, and they expect it. I need you at your best. Hey, I don't feel well today. Well, then we're going to scrub today. We're going to reschedule when you feel better, because I want you at your best, and the audience expects it. So let's give it to them. And then they'll go, really? Oh,
yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Thanks.
Right on. Yeah.
And then you, as a producer, figure out what you're going to do next. But those are the things that I'm looking for the person to find and go, I heard this. I heard the show hit a new gear. I heard the guest unlock and start going. And I heard you in my head saying, shut up. I talk about the form of questions too. There's so many things to talk about with question theory, and I don't want to dive too deep because we're going to run out of time. But like, closed questions are good questions. Like, if I want control of something, I'll ask you a closed question. Don't you agree? And then you'll say yes or no. It doesn't matter what you say. I now have control, And if you agree with me, I just take you down that road. And if you don't agree with me, I take you down the road anyhow. And then the interrogatives, the who, what, where, when, why, how, all those questions are also closed questions. If you can remove that interrogative from the front of that, what happened next? If you just said, and
Right.
whatever it is, that's masterful. Really is. That's when you're doing it well. Like when to not go, well, what happened next? Like,
yeah, it's too verbal, or it's too, it's like static or expected or something.
Yeah.
It's like this one word, regrets.
Just
it's like
let
that
silence
example.
hang and let them fill in the blank. Because when you say what happened next, you're denying every other option from that timeline. Maybe they want to say, "Oh, I've got to tell you the most important." Let me give you an example of this. I had Andrew Bernstein on the show. He's an a WNBA Hall of Fame photographer. He took all the photos, right?
Whoa.
Yeah, all of them. And he was telling me about his path to getting to this point. And he's like, I'm on the East Coast. I'm this Jewish kid. I'm doing all the standard things. And I like sports and everything else. And then I moved to LA, and then it all happened. And I'm like, stop. Wait, hold on. You moved to, and I'm compressing a lot of time here, but you moved to LA. I mean, why? And he's like, oh, wait, I should tell you this. My sister is Didi Khan. She was Frenchie in Greece.
Oh my gosh.
And when she was making Grease, I came out and I slept on her couch. And then I saw this billboard and it changed my whole life. When he tells that story, he doesn't have to tell you the Didi Khan part. He doesn't have to, because, it's not about her. But for the audience, what a gem,
That's beautiful. Oh, man. And you put on the brakes. Stop. Wait a minute. Tell me about that decision. How did this happen? Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful.
Kind of examples like that do you have? Like those magical moments when someone gives you something unexpected and you're like, that was me. I created that moment.
You mean as a guest?
As a host. Like
as a host. I'm trying to think. Have I had those? So, I haven't been podcasting actively as a host for a while here. So this is a test of my memory, which is, fades with age, right? Have I had, I don't know. I know we're pressed for time, so it's tough for me, Pete. A moment that I had that really unlocked I think it's about an emotional unlocking of a guest. The nature of my show, to be quite honest, was business, and I tended to stay on the rails. I think if I were to do that show today, and particularly after I've learned from you, what I've learned from you today about putting some thought around, it's all about the emotion. I think I would approach some of these interviews differently. So it's not exactly the answer to your question, but this was a very constructive experience for me. So I appreciate that. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you giving me the best that you had at that moment. And I'm sure like 10 minutes and I'd be like, I got to call Pete back.
I'm sure it'll come back to me, but I wasn't prepared for that one, but there probably were a few where I had a magical moment where I just tweaked it just right. And then the moment was just right. And they said something unexpected to me about how they handled a situation in their business, for example, but I don't have any specific.
Let's plug your business. Audavita.
Audavita. Yeah. Go ahead.
Am I saying it right? Audavita?
Yes, you are.
Okay, good. I got it right.
Thank you. Yeah, we got it. Yeah.
So obviously people wanting to start out doing podcasts, or businesses wanting to do podcasts, the authors who want to record their book. What else?
What in terms of what we do? So we are helping them get the distribution for all of the above out. So it's not just production, but we actually handle the whole work cycle of getting it out to all the channels they need to do to sell the product, if it's an audiobook or podcast distribution. So we advise, we help, we do all that stuff. It's turnkey stuff. We also do some video work. We've got a few guys that cut video on our team, and they're very good. So we do book trailers, and that's a part of our business that's starting to activate. And the other thing that's activating is this live to packaged podcast model, live events then distributed in all the channels. So those are the things that seem to be, we're leaning into those more now.
Yeah, this live event thing that becomes a podcast. And you think about all these moments, there's all these private chat groups that are doing Zoom meetings with these wonderful guests, and they like record it. Record it. All like this guest speaker you're going to have at your school. Record it.
Why would you not? Yeah, you might as well hit the record button because something beautiful might happen, and
Yeah.
put it out. As a guy that always.
Yeah.
This is me at 5, fascinated with the microphone. Yeah.
See, look at that. It goes all the way back your whole life. I love it.
So that's, I keep that around to just remind me the moment of fascination.
Yes, I love it.
PA mic. Yeah.
To capture that. Hey, time for one more question. I'm going to let you ask me anything you want.
Oh my gosh. Well, I would love to ask you about your career as as a spy, but it's probably not the question that I should be asking. Oh my gosh. Do you play? You sound like you're a musician, the way we talked about music. You sound like you really got an inside understanding of that.
Yeah, I would say I'm not an audiophile like in the traditional sense. I'm not going to play a bunch of records and that kind of thing. But I am an audiophile in that I love music, and I have some capacity to play the guitar. I can play. If you show me the chord, I may not know the name, but I'm like, is that a seventh? I know stuff like that.
Yeah, you can hear it. Yeah.
Yeah, I can hear it, and like you said, play B minor with the seventh. I can do that. Maybe not up and down the entire neck, but yeah, I can follow along, and I can play. What I try to do is I try to play good enough that I can sing a song, and play along with it and keep it simple. So like I'll play like Poncho and Lefty, and then I just play slow, like
yeah,
living on the road, my friends, like that, just 3 chords. We're trying to free and clean, just 3 chords per line, maybe 2 chords. And then just sing simply. That's what I can do. And then I play harmonica pretty good too. If I practice, I can.
Really?
I can play what other people play. I'm not really great at soloing, and no one's asking me to. So I wouldn't say I'm a musician. I'm a person that has some musical capability. But yeah, I get it. But I also know a lot about music. A lot of music because I'm fascinated by. I can talk intelligently about Bach. I can talk intelligently about Prince. And a lot of stuff in between and why they matter and everything else. So I've spent a lot of time learning about it. My dad had a degree in music. And so there was a lot of music in the house. It was church music, but still it was music. And that means you learned about Bach and you learned about Mozart.
That's right.
All these guys who were Kapellmeisters. So yeah, the musical part of my soul is it's pretty profound. There's a lot in there.
Yeah, I could feel that as we were talking about it. You just seemed to kind of understand the inside life as we were talking about funk and grooves and the pocket, and those are things that only people that are musical can understand, like you. So
and they're great questions for musicians. You're describing the pocket. A question I ask every drummer that if I get the chance to do it, and if you've got a minute, I'm going to ask you.
Yeah, let's do it.
I'm a big U2 fan. I just am crazy about him. But Larry Mullen Jr. doesn't play the drums the way he's supposed to, and yet nobody has more signature drum parts than what he does, right? So people like in the drum world are like, he's no good, but he's also brilliant because he's completely approached it differently. I don't know. I'd always try to understand.
Yeah, I think I think I can leg into that one. So that's like a Ringo Starr question too, right? Because there's a signature way and approach to how they play with others. It's almost like the social musical thing with Ringo, the way he would glue and also the way he would phrase. There's just something very a signature there. But if you look at his technique, does he have the fastest chops? Is he the most technically proficient player? No, I wouldn't say so. But it's what he brings to the music with the instrument. That's the question that he's answering. He brings something to it.
Yeah.
So for the jazz, for those of us who are snobs with like all kinds of technique, but the guys that play million notes, but nothing really connects with the audience, that's the other extreme. So,
yeah. It's like, did he mean for that flam to happen? And then just once it happened on accident, he just went with it and it made that great fail. Like those kind of things.
I love that. Yeah.
Was that genius or is it freedom of expression and it got him there because he didn't know the rules or whatever it was. So,
and allowed it to happen without censoring himself or feeling self-conscious. And maybe that's the foundation. That's where the heart came in, and that's why it's connecting, and that's why it activates us as listeners. It's funny.
Yeah. Hey, well, listen, I appreciate you coming on. We had an hour and done a little bit plus, and I appreciate that too.
Oh, thanks so much, Pete. Great to be with you. Great to be with you. Great fun.
I'm going to sign off. Stand by.